Hey, greetings. It's Naomi Wolf. Happy Monday. And I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Those of you who observe Shabbat, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, um, Operation Shabbat Shalom, kind of joking. I am just wishing you belatedly a wonderful Sabbath. Just a reminder before we dive in that everyone used to celebrate Sabbath. Christians used to celebrate on Saturday, as I understand, and then it switched to Sunday. I'll have to look into the reasons for that. But of course, Jews have always celebrated the Sabbath on the seventh day, as we count, which is Saturday. B'yom Shishi Shabbat V'Nafash. On the sixth day, God rested. So it was a really cool day. I had a wonderful time. My dog always wants to sit on my lap when I prepare to read the Torah, which is kind of trippy, right? Like, how would he know? He doesn't always want to sit on my lap, but he somehow knows when I'm about to read the Torah. Here we go. Loki's joining us. And of course, the Revised Standard Version, the Catholic Modern Version, and the Geneva Bible, the 1560 Protestant translation from the Hebrew, the Founders Bible, the Puritans Bible, Jefferson's Bible, Shakespeare's Bible, the great work of literature that has kind of been pushed aside in favor of later dramatic mistranslations into English. So, as you know, one mission of mine is to read you the Hebrew and translate it literally, read you the fantastic English 16th century translation from the Hebrew with a little bit of real-time updating of these and thous into you and yours. But I think we've made incredible progress. And today is quite special. The weird synchronicities continue to happen. I'll be writing an essay about this, but the last chapter or two chapters we read had a prohibition, a very stern prohibition against worshiping at strange altars. And bad things happened. You recall an Israelite man and a Midianite woman were murdered in their tent, or in the man's tent, for the crime, in Yahweh's view, of her luring him to worship at an altar of Baal. And I actually, over the weekend, had a very trippy experience of going to a women's circle that I thought was like, we'll have tea and share our feelings, do some deep meditation maybe. And it turned out to have an altar. And I'll write about this, but it was definitely a pagan worship. Like, there's no gentler way to put it. I'm not being critical of the people who held it. I'm not being critical of my friend who brought me there. I'm really glad to have been included. But I am going to be writing an essay later today about the fact that, like, paganism is kind of seeping into pagan worship, including worship of the elements, worship of ancestors, worship of flame, worship of objects on altars. It's becoming quite normalized in our society for reasons that are, kind of understandable, but also sad. I think people are alienated from modern Christianity, a lot of modern interpretations of Christianity at church, modern Judaism. I certainly felt alienated. The richness and depth and power of these original texts has been so watered down, I kind of think intentionally. So most people, if they go to kind of a modern version of a lot of denominations of Christianity or Judaism, really never get to read the Bible, beginning to end in an accurate translation. We barely get the Latin Mass anymore if we're Catholic. I mean, I think it's quite hard to find a Latin Mass these days. And, as a Jew, I'm astonished to discover that I spent, years and years and years going to a conservative, which is kind of in the middle in Judaism. It's not Orthodox and it's not Reform, temple without really ever reading the Torah, maybe bits and snippets out of context, and some of the most alarming bits and snippets out of context. But, I was, and my rabbi was wonderful, but the reforms of these religions have really left people feeling very lost, because, you dilute something enough and you don't know what you're drinking anymore. Essentially, the essence is gone or hard to find. So in that vacuum, I'm seeing a lot of pagan practices, which are easy and concrete and made work. I mean, some of the things that the women's circle I went to taught, which I'm not doing, but they taught them, are basically witchcraft. And the woman who taught it acknowledged that it was witchcraft. So maybe that really works, on some level or with some kind of energies. But, and I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm just noticing here in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, there are many, many, many young people, especially in their 20s and 30s is what I'm seeing, especially in their 30s, who want something to hold on to, want something to believe in, want some community and face-to-face, meaningful spiritual practice. And they're not getting it in churches and synagogues for whatever reason, in most churches and synagogues, or many. If they were, they wouldn't be, flocking to the worship of Gaia, which is happening down the street where I live, or, ancestor circles or ayahuasca circles. All of these things are not fringe anymore in Brooklyn and Manhattan, where I'm spending a lot of my time these days. They are squarely now in the culture. And meanwhile, churches and synagogues, if they're not traditional, are closing down empty, and really almost clutching at relevance, seem to be reconfiguring their missions to be about immigration or anti-ICE or, environmentalist or, LGBTQ forward, instead of just, as everyone should, welcoming people of all sexualities. As Jesus never talked about homosexuality or lesbianism, right? He just said, love everybody. So it's definitely a spiritual vacuum, in this blue city anyway. And I went to a circle of witches. Like, I just don't know how to put it, but it did freak me out a bit. And I'm kind of aware that I came very close to a real pagan altar. And I guess I wouldn't have thought twice about that before I read the Hebrew Bible. But, 2 chapters back, God was like, okay, you went whoring after other altars, essentially, which is the concentration of the worship is at the altar. That's it. I'm done with you. So I really don't want to mess with that. Not sure why I'm sharing, just to say, I think this reading isn't archaic. It's very relevant. It seems like we're reading very ancient texts, or, in the case of the Geneva Bible, a text that's like 400 years old. But we're also reading stories that are incredibly germane to just getting through modern life. Incredibly relevant. And the more I read this text, the more I find that I draw on the lessons of it in my daily life, just getting through the day. And the other thing I'm going to say before we dive in is I think these things are really important now more than ever, like serving God and knowing whom you're serving, right? And knowing your faith tradition. And again, I'm not proselytizing. We're forbidden to proselytize in Judaism. You're not supposed to be like, come be Jewish. But very scary things are happening in New York City and in Brooklyn. And I love all religions. I love many Muslim people. I've studied and loved many parts of the Holy Quran. Not trying to paint any religion in a broad brush. However, huge assemblies of mostly men, with women segregated, Muslim men are being deployed, it feels like, in public spaces, beloved public spaces of mine, like Washington Square Park, where my kids grew up, or Prospect Park, which is literally a few blocks away. And these are massive, thousands and thousands of mostly men, as I said. And I'm very concerned about it because we're in the modern world, we're used to religion staying in church or mosque or synagogue. But in the medieval world and into the Renaissance, right, and into the Civil War in England, religion spilled over into politics. Religion was politics. Essentially, religion was militarism. Religion was a national identity. And we thought those days were behind us, but they're back. And I do feel that Islam is being used by Mayor Mamdani and the forces behind him. His wife turns out to have spent most of her life as an adult cheering for extremist Islamist terrorists, cheering for events like October 7th. But Mamdani is, and this is happening in capitals throughout the West, imposing Islam not as a religion into public spaces, but as a political declaration or a militant declaration of some sort. And I'm not telling you how to react to that. It's illegal to do that in New York. You can't make public space discriminatory on religion or gender. And for sure, as a woman, I could not have walked right through that gathering of men with my dog, let alone with my dog. It was discriminatory. It is unlawful, according to two laws, at least. One is the 1964 Federal Equal Rights Act, which ended separate but equal, ended Jim Crow. You can't say this part of the park is for Muslims or Christians or Jews or white people or Black people. You can't do it. It's illegal and good. That was a much needed reform, that law. And then the other law is a New York municipal law that says that you can't discriminate in public access, and that's anywhere: theaters, hospitals, certainly parks. So our own mayor, our first Muslim mayor, as he keeps boasting, is breaking our own law, both on the municipal and the federal level, by endorsing and supporting and arranging permits, which also are needed for that kind of gathering, for these discriminatory gatherings. And I don't want to be dragged back into the 17th century, or the 16th century, the age of religious wars in the West. I don't want to. I wish they'd stop. I wish everyone would go back to their mosque or their synagogue and their church and, have this beautiful, peaceful, pluralistic society, no established religion that our founders envisioned. But that's not what's happening right now. So I do feel it's very important for Christian Europe. Many of those nations are Christian. Italy is Catholic. Britain is Church of England. These are Christian nations. It's not like rhetorical. They have established churches. We in America don't. I think they need to be Christian again. Hopefully not discriminate against religious minorities, but I think they need to reclaim their roots and their religious roots. And I think that we in America also, I'm not telling you what to do, but we need to know what the Bible said. We need to know, if we're Jewish, we need to know what it means to be Jewish. If we're Christian, we need to know what it means to be Christian. If we're Jewish, we need to know what it means to be Christian. If we're Christian, we need to know what it means to be Jewish. Everyone needs to know what it means to be Muslim. I wish these were dusty artifacts of the past and everyone could just go have a private religious life, as our founders intended. But we are in a time of weird religious warfare. I don't know why. I don't know why God is bringing about a kind of thinning of the veil so that we're forced to take a stand. We're forced to know who we are, who God is, what we worship, what the 10 Commandments are, what the 7 Noahide laws are. But I think the pressure of radical Islam seeking to kind of subvert and overtake a lot of pluralistic public institutions in the West, maybe it's God's way. Like we've seen it over and over, and I'm not saying Muslims don't worship a real God. It's the same God, right? Allah, El, it's the same root. Elohim means God. When someone says Allahu Akbar, it just means God is great. Akbar is great. Allah is God, who is in Hebrew as well. He is great. It's the same God. They're all the Abrahamic religions. They all have the same roots. This book is the root that we're reading. But that's, that one arm of this is being politicized. If another arm were being politicized, I would issue the same warning. If radical, if Chabad armed themselves and started to kind of, engage in massive aggressive displays in Prospect Park, I'd be like, that's not what Judaism is supposed to be doing, right? We're a pluralistic society. But we have to have these conversations, and we have to know what the Bible said, in my opinion. And I'm glad to be doing that. And I've already got a critic. Carrie Lavender says, your Zionist views make all the work you do highly sus. Now, never mind, I'll explain in a minute. I've seen you live for Israel. Shame on you. You don't know why there's a war. Radical Islam, fucking wake up. All right. Don't know where to begin with that. I guess what I would say is, if you think Palestinians have the right to their nation, which I do believe, and then you have to agree that Israel has a right to its nation. Palestine is an Islamic nation. Israel is a Jewish nation. Zionism is exactly the same as being pro-Palestinian. It just means these people have a right to exist. Now, you haven't asked me how I define Zionism or being pro-Palestinian, because I feel like I am pro-Palestinian as well, pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. I still want a two-state solution. It seems like the pro-Palestinian side has given up on that and has slogans like from the river to the sea, which does away with a two-state solution. It's a one-state solution in which Israel doesn't exist. Who knows what happens to those millions of Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis, for that matter. So I don't think there's anything wrong. If you support Palestine, and I do, and you support, people being at peace in Palestine, and I do, and you support the 1948 partition, which I do, which created two nations. I don't support, illegal settlement by Israel. I don't support border raids by Palestine across the Israeli border. Two sovereign nations side by side, both of them theocracies, probably, right? Palestinians follow Muslim law in their legal code. Then I don't see what the problem is, respectfully. And I haven't lied for Israel. If you want to post what you think is a lie, I will either correct it or give you the evidence for why I said it. I never lie. And I guess I would also point out that in these times when there's so much fomenting of division, it's very important not just to insult people personally, or not to insult people personally, but just bring the evidence. Bring your evidence, bring the link, show me what I did wrong. I'll take responsibility for it. But again, I have always argued for a peaceful coexistence, for the civil rights of Palestinian civilians, for the civil rights of Israeli civilians. So I don't see why you're yelling at me, honestly. And I do know why there's a war, because Iran was building nuclear warheads, and we, and also international anti-nuclear groups, asked them to stop, and they didn't stop. And I may be wrong about that, but that's the way it looks to me right now. And I hope for peace. Roscoe, my good friend Roscoe, says Islam is not an Abrahamic religion any more than Hinduism is. Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure I agree with you about that, Roscoe, because so many of the passages in the Holy Quran are kind of built on passages in the Hebrew Bible. And we share, literally, they're called Abrahamic religions because the Arab Muslim world and the Jewish world both descend from Father Abraham. They do through the line of Esau, and we do through the line of Jacob. So we're cousins, as people used to say in the old city back when things were more peaceful. And back when Jewish Israelis went to the old city and had friends in the old city like my parents did, who were Palestinian. All right, let's go now to Numbers 28, and we start always with the Geneva Bible, the beautiful pre-Elizabethan text, and you can see it. I'm going to enlarge it right there. Here we go. Chapter 28, Numbers. And you remember where we were. The last chapter had to do with the property rights of women, and also with the death of Moses being foretold by Yahweh, that he would not cross over to see the promised land. And very sad. And the establishment of a line of succession to take over, who's Joshua, when Moshe is quote unquote gathered to his people. So this is chapter 28. And the subheadline says, the daily sacrifice, the sacrifice of the Sabbath, of the month, of the Passover, of the first fruits. And that's that's not in the text. That's the paraphrase by the translators. And the Lord spoke unto Moshe, saying, command the children of Israel and say unto them, ye shall observe to offer unto me in their due season mine offering and my bread, for my sacrifices made by fire for a sweet savor unto me. And the note says, by bread, he means all manner of sacrifice. And indeed, in the 16th century, bread it meant bread, but it also meant like, give me this day my daily bread. It's like my food, okay? Also, you shall say unto them, this is the offering made by fire, which you shall offer unto the Lord, 2 lambs of a year old without spot, meaning blemish, daily, for a continual burnt offering. 1 lamb shall you prepare in the morning, and the other lamb shall you prepare at evening, and the 10th part of an ephah of fine flour for a meat offering, mingled with the 4th part of an hin, which is a measure of beaten oil. This shall be a daily burnt offering, as was made in the Mount Sinai, for a sweet savor. It is a sacrifice made by fire unto the Lord. And a drink offering thereof of the 4th part of an hin for 1 lamb in the holy place, cause to pour the drink offering unto the Lord. And the other lamb you shall prepare at evening, as the meat offering of the morning, and as the drink offering thereof shall you prepare this for an offering made by fire of sweet savor unto the Lord. But on the Sabbath day you shall offer 2 lambs of a year old without spot, without blemish, and the note says, the meat offering and something offering, drink offering of the evening sacrifice. Let's turn the page and go over here. 2/10 deals, a measure of fine flour for meat offering mingled with oil, and the drink offering thereof. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, beside the continual burnt offering and drink offering there was. And the note said, which was offered every day at morning and at evening. And in the beginning of your months, ye shall offer a burnt offering unto the Lord 2 young bullocks and a ram, and 7 lambs of a year old without spot, and 3/10 deals of fine flour for a meat offering mingled with oil for 1 bullock, and 2/10 deals of fine flour for a meat offering mingled with oil for 1 ram, and a 10th deal of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering unto 1 lamb for a burnt offering of sweet savor, is an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And their drink offerings shall be half an hin of wine unto 1 bullock, and the 3rd part of an hin unto a ram, and the 4th part of an hin unto a lamb. This is the burnt offering of every month throughout the months of the year. And the note says, that is the wine that shall be poured upon the sacrifice. And 1 he-goat for a sin offering unto the Lord shall be prepared, besides the continual burnt offering and his drink offering. Also, the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord. And believe it or not, we're coming up soon. It's in less than 2 weeks, or it's in a little over 2 weeks. And in the 15th day of the same month, it is the feast. 7 days that unleavened bread shall be eaten. In the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. But you shall offer a sacrifice made by fire for a burnt offering unto the Lord, 2 young bullocks, 1 ram, and 7 lambs of a year old. See that they be without blemish. And their meat offering shall be of fine flour mingled with oil. The 10th deals shall you prepare for a bullock, and 2 tenth deals for a ram. 1/10 deal shall you prepare for every lamb, even for the 7 lambs. And he-goat for a sin offering to make an atonement for you. You shall prepare these beside the burnt offering in the morning, which is a continual burnt sacrifice. After this manner, you shall prepare throughout all the 7 days for the, quote, maintaining, I'm not sure what those quote marks are, for the maintaining of the offering made by fire for a sweet savor unto the Lord. It shall be done beside the continual burnt offering and drink offering thereof. And in the 7th day you shall have an holy convocation, wherein you shall do no servile work. So a convocation is a gathering. And the note says, in counting 7 weeks from the Passover to Whitsuntide, as, and there's a citation. Also in the day of your first fruits, when you bring a new meat offering unto the Lord, according to your weeks, you shall have an holy convocation, and you shall do no servile work in it. But you shall offer a burnt offering for a sweet savor unto the Lord, 2 young bullocks, a ram, and 7 lambs of a year old, and their meat offering of fine flour mingled with oil, 3/10 deals unto a bullock, 2/10 deals unto a ram, and 1/10 deal unto every lamb throughout the 7 lambs. And he-goat to make an atonement for you. You shall do this besides the continual burnt offering and his meat offering. See they be without blemish with their drink offerings. And what does the note say? Abraham, Abi, this shall be to you. I can't really interpret that. See they be without blemish with their drink offerings. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. And it is, as we've said before about other chapters, an administrative chapter. Each time we check in on the priesthood and the act of sacrifice, it gets more and more complicated or complex or sophisticated, depending on how you see it, more elaborate, or clarified, maybe I should say, because earlier, I think in Leviticus, there was lots and lots and lots and lots about how to sacrifice for a heave offering, right? How to sacrifice for a sin offering or an offering of atonement, how much oil, how much flour. So this is kind of, you can feel like time has passed and questions have arisen about this. And so this is almost like a manual as opposed to a first draft or initial instructions, I should say, because nothing's a first draft from God probably, but initial instructions that Moshe transmitted in Leviticus when the sacrifices were first being explained to the children of Israel. I just want to talk for a minute because this is such a technical chapter. It's about how to do something, not so much why or to what purpose. The chapter is written as if God's already explained why, and God did explain it back in, again, Leviticus, possibly Exodus. I confess I don't recall. But let me take a quick look. But, the instructions about sacrifice and how to do it, recur throughout these texts. Sacrifice in Hebrew Bible. And what is a sacrifice, right? And why do we care? And you can see there's a lot about ancient sacrifice, which was a standard way of observing, prayer. Like it everyone was making sacrifices. People worshiping Baal were making sacrifices. People worshiping cats in Egypt were making sacrifices. But as I've explained before, the word for sacrifice in Hebrew comes from the root for to draw near, to come closer, karov, korban, right? And so for this kind of sacrifice, it's not just Baal wants a dead child to consume, or, Asherah wants some pigeons. And by the way, I'm reading right now about the Roman Empire. The Greek and Roman world, and the Persian world too, I believe, didn't just make sacrifices. They also read the entrails of the sacrificed animals as a form of divination. So this was not a weird, killing animals was not a weird departure that God was asking of the children of Israel. It was an absolutely standard way for the ancient peoples all around the children of Israel to pray, to propitiate also. Gods at that time were seen as very, punitive if they didn't get their sacrifices. So you'd want to make a sacrifice or make an offering if you had a victory or a good harvest as thanks, almost the way you'd bribe a government official. But you'd also want to, be sure to sacrifice to Baal or Asherah or, the cat gods in Egypt, because you want to forestall terrible things happening. It's, propitiate is the word. It's to mollify, to, again, kind of pre-bribe, to stay on the good side of the gods that affect your fate. So Yahweh here is introducing a completely different notion of what sacrifice is for, as I understand it. And he's kind of saying clearly, it's not about the pigeons. It's not about the goats. I don't need to eat that stuff. By calling it korban, you draw near, he's saying, do this as a methodology to draw near to me, to come close to me. And we've talked about this, but I think that methodology is like, if you're thinking about giving something up for God's sake, you're in a mind, or offering something you love, right? Or that could benefit you. Just like any love relationship, you're in a mindset that's receptive to God. It's like when you shop for a Valentine's Day present for your wife or husband or partner, you're not giving up something you really want, or thinking that, those roses cost me $12, right? I mean, that would be a really messed up relationship if that's how you felt. When you're shopping for a present for someone you love, you feel happy, you're happy you can do it, you're thinking about what will make him or her happy. When you give the present, it does make him or her happy. And, usually the recipient, you've heard the phrase, it's the thought that counts. The recipient isn't thinking, oh, he spent $12 on these roses, he must love me. The recipient is thinking, he really thought about me, or she really thought about me. She's giving to me, or he's giving to me. He must really love me. So I think that, and where do I pick that up? We've talked about this, but the way God talks about sacrifice is, some of it is an atonement. So it's like he knows humans are going to mess up. So he gives them a way to get back in alignment with him, right? Like confession and mass and absolution. And that's just like good parenting, because he knows they're going to mess up, and that we feel bad when we mess up, and it makes us feel far away from God. So God provides a solution, but which is the regular weekly or daily sacrifices. And the other thing is that, again, that root korban, karov, and also the phrase reach nichoach, which we talked about, which is translated here as a sweet savor or a sweet scent. We talked about it, but if you weren't here for those episodes, reach is wind, literally. It also means spirit. When Matthew translates the gospel from the Hebrew in the Hebrew Matthew, which is either a 1st century or a 14th century text, the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit is reach. It's wind, the sacred wind, which is beautiful. I think it's beautiful. But it certainly also means spirit. They're the same word, almost the same meaning, right? And reach nichoach is a pleasing wind, or a sweet savor, a sweet spirit rising up to God. I'm sorry, I got that totally wrong. And when you're reading the Torah, you always have to correct things immediately. Ruach is wind. I beg your pardon. Reach is scent or odor. So it is a sweet odor or a pleasing odor. That was embarrassing, but I corrected it. So I still think that my point kind of holds, which is God doesn't need to eat this food, but we are kind of bonding with God by transmuting human food, which God can't like sit down in a body, probably not until, if you believe Jesus is the Messiah, until Jesus showed up, or God's messenger. Many debates about who Jesus is still, but at this time, the children of Israel couldn't just sit down physically and eat with God, even though God has appeared multiple times in the Hebrew text to humans, but they could chemically transmute by fire their food into a scent, a reach, an odor that God could enjoy, and thus kind of have a meal together, connect with each other. So the other thing I want to say about sacrifice before we go on, I'm not going to read the whole Hebrew because it's such a technical chapter. I don't think there's much to glean from my reading the whole Hebrew, but I'll show it to you so you can see the beautiful Hebrew texts. I also want to talk about what happened to the sacrifice. The tent of meeting, one of the central functions is sacrifice, right? And one of the central roles of the priest is to help people make those sacrifices or to make them themselves. And then when they're later on in the story, when there's a first temple and then a second temple in Jerusalem, the main function of the priests is to, people go up from all over the country to make their offerings at the temple, and the priests slaughter their offerings. During Shavuot, they bring their first fruits very beautifully. We talked about this last spring when it was near Shavuot. And I even sang you the song I learned as a little child in Israel about Shavuot. And this carried on until the temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. And Jews were dispersed all over the world, as was predicted. Okay, as was predicted, which is so trippy. But anyway, I asked my rabbi at Chabad on Shabbat, why don't we still sacrifice? And why don't we rebuild the temple? Well, obviously it would be an international incident if we did, because the Dome of the Rock is now on the temple. So there's a Muslim sacred site built right on top of the holiest site for the Jews, which no one seems to have a problem with, but whatever, it's there. God bless them. They have full access to it. Jews don't have access to it, by the way. Only Muslims can go to Dome of the Rock. Christians don't have access to it, as I understand, just Muslims. But anyway, there it is. Point is, even if we could build the temple without causing an international incident, there's even my good friend, whom I won't keep naming because I'm so heartbroken about her, but various people seem on the right seem to believe a weird myth that there's a secret cult of Jews who plan to rebuild the temple, like the third temple now. And that's like going to somehow theologically displace Christianity. None of that is true. We can't rebuild the temple, says my rabbi, and I'm sure there are different views about this if you poll enough different communities and interpretations. But according to rabbinical texts, we can't build the third temple because God builds the third temple. Only God can build it. So the rabbis in exile substituted prayer for sacrifices because we didn't have a temple anymore. And prayer functions the same way sacrifice used to, he said. So that's why we have a morning service, an afternoon service, and an evening service, and then one extra, I think on Shabbat, which is called Musaf, which means added. So Shacharit, which is dawn, Mincha is the end of the day, and or the middle of the day, and Mariv, which is in the evening. And I can't believe I know all of that. I didn't even know I knew all of that, but I have a very educational rabbi. So that's what we're doing all over the world instead of sacrificing animals, because we lost the temple and we're not supposed to rebuild it. God is supposed to rebuild it. So let's see, you can see here. Oh, that's interesting. Chabad translates from the Hebrew reach nichoach as a spirit of satisfaction for me. And I think that's a good translation. And this is about the lambs and the burnt offering and the libations. And it says Passover. Let's see how they translate it. Uvachodesh harishon, and in the first month, be'arba'a asar yom lechodesh, on the 14th day of the month, Pesach le'Adonai. It's a Passover. Pesach is the word for Passover, to God. And you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days, which literally we still do. On the first day is a holy convocation. Bayom harishon, on the first day, mikra kodesh. It's a holy calling. Likra is to call. Mikra kodesh. Kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu. Don't do any mundane work. And you remember the two different words for work. One is avodah, which can also mean service, and one is melacha, which can also mean craft or artistry. And on Shabbat or holy days, you're not supposed to do melacha. And this, for emphasis, kol melacha avodah, every craft-like work or service, don't do. And then it tells you what to offer up, offer these 7 days, and let's see, on the Vayom HaBikurim, and on the day of the first fruits, Bikurim, Behakrivchem, and that there's that verb again, lakriv, in your coming forward, in your drawing closer, Mincha Chadasha L'Adonai, a new meal offering to the Lord, Bishavuotechem, in your weeks, mikra kodesh yeh, a holy convocation there will be, lachem, to you, kol mlechet avodah lo ta'asu, every work like artistry or craft, don't do it. And then it says what to do about the lambs. So it's all pretty straightforward. And now let's close that and go to the Revised Standard Version. Is there anything unusual or new about the Revised Standard Version that's been interpolated there? Let's take a look. Let's see. If you were here yet, the last reading on Friday, you saw that there were very serious, mistranslations in the last chapter that, as is often the case with the Revised Standard Version, assigned authority to priests that didn't exist in the original. And you can see all my shopping. It's fine. I buy shoes, I buy glassware. You get to see all of it if you can see my screen. All right. The Lord said to Moses, command the people of Israel and say to them, my offering, my food for my offerings by fire, my pleasing odor, you shall take heed to offer me in its due season. my offering, my food for my offerings by fire, my pleasing odor. Does it say that? Line 20, line 28, number 2, it's command that my offering, my food for my fire offerings, a spirit of satisfaction for me. All right, there is that emphasis that it's mine, it's for me. God is saying, do it for me. And you shall say to them, this is the offering by fire which you shall offer to the Lord. And then it goes into the details. You shall offer it as an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. That's fine. On the Sabbath day, 2 male lambs a year old without blemish. That's fine. At the beginning of your months, you shall offer a burnt offering to the Lord. And all the animals and the measurements, the male goat, on the 14th day of the first month is the Lord's Passover. Does it say that? Let's take a look. Line 16. Sometimes I just hear weird mistranslations, and I go back and check, and usually they are weird mistranslations. It doesn't say that. Uvachodesh harishon, and in the first month, be'arba'a asar yom, in the 14th day, lachodesh, to the month, Pesach le'Adonai, Passover to God, literally. And let's see how they translated that. Passover to God. They translated it the Lord's Passover. Is the Lord's Passover. I don't know. I much prefer Passover to God because it isn't the Lord in Hebrew. The Lord is a different word. Adonai is, well, is it Adonai? Let's take a look. You shall offer up le Adonai. It is. Okay, I'm sorry. It is the Lord. All right. Well, I'm making 2 mistakes today. But it's a Passover to God. It's not God's Passover. The reason I feel like this translation is significant is that the Passover belongs to everyone, to the children of Israel, maybe to the non-children of Israel who are in their midst, who are also welcomed to this day to join the Passover table. It's a Passover that the community is giving to God and sharing in. It's not the Lord's Passover. It doesn't belong to him like he's hogging it all and not sharing it with humans. It's a meal he has with humans and vice versa. On the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. That's fine. But offer an offering by fire, a burnt offering to the Lord, and then the animals and the grains. You shall do no laborious work. 1 male goat to make atonement for you, besides the continual burnt offering and its cereal offering. You shall offer them and their drink offering. See that they are without blemish. That's fine. The only real mistranslation is the one that I shared with you. That's it, you guys. We've just had almost 50 minutes of Torah. Are there things you want to say about this? I think it's really interesting that this religion that did sacrifice and did have a temple for 1,500 years, or much of 1,500 years, I should say, because they haven't gotten to the promised land yet. They have a temple in the wilderness, right? It was interrupted when they were sent into Babylonian exile. But they've had the tent of meeting and then eventually a physical first temple and then a physical second temple right up until 70 AD. Now, for the last 2,000 years, we haven't had a temple. We have synagogues, which are different, right? And they echo the temple because they have Aron HaKodesh, which we've talked about, which is the cabinet, Aron HaKodesh, the holy, which holds the Torah, which is the book I'm reading to you. And that's the center. It's not the center of worship because God is who we worship and there are no idols. There are no statues of God. You know, we're not supposed to make pictures of God. We're actually not supposed to make pictures of humans at all, which is a prohibition that Orthodox Judaism shares with Islam, or Islam shares with Orthodox Judaism. But the center of everything, the reverence, goes toward the Torah. And this wasn't, this was something I made this case very clearly when Tucker Carlson, once again, a few months ago, was saying, oh, they worship the Talmud. We worship God. And the center of prayer in a synagogue is the Torah behind a beautiful velvet curtain, behind a carved, beautiful cabinet, held with reverence, not touched by human hands, touched by a silver pointer. I've talked about all of this about a year ago when this last came up. But I just think it's so interesting. I can't think of another religion in which the temple, the sacred temple, the center of all worship, was destroyed. And then instead of trying to rebuild a temple, right, and get that institutional power back, Jews after the after the 70 AD exile that just ended in 1948, basically said, the rabbis said, we can't rebuild it. God, kicked us out for a reason, basically. We don't know what it is, but it was God's will that we lost the temple. A lot of speculation about why. We can't rebuild it. We will pray instead. And in the place of sacrifices, there will be prayer. There are no more priests. We don't have that. Those kohanim are not the same as the rabbis. Rabbis are learned men and now women who distinguish themselves through their reading of the Torah, and they're not the direct linear descendants of the Kohanim, Aaron and his descendants. That tribe still exists. If you meet someone called Cohen or Levi, they are descended from these tribes that helped with sacrifice. Levi's, right? Literally, it's an ancient name. Kohanim are the priests, and Levi is one of the tribes of Israel. But we don't have like a papal succession, right? We don't have like an ultimate human authority that dictates to the whole Jewish world what's going on. We have very senior rabbis. We have councils of rabbis way up there. I don't even know the hierarchy, because your ordinary rabbi down the street doesn't get like talking points from those people. Your ordinary rabbi down the street is just trying to figure out what the Torah says and explain it along with the congregation. This is something people really have to understand that's different about Judaism. Everyone's trying to figure out what the Torah says together, right? And women aren't even prohibited. They're not compelled to study Torah the way that in Orthodox religion, the way that men are, males over 13, but they're welcome to study Torah. So everyone's trying to figure it out. And if I'll bring a Chumash, which is a prayer book, or a Tanakh, which is the Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the sacred text from Chabad, the next time I go there, I'll borrow one or take one out of the library and show you. It's got like detailed argument back and forth between rabbis about, various issues, tiny to big, like what does an ephah really mean, right? All the way to, what takes the place. How do you conduct your daily life, your business, details. And the arguments go on for pages. And this is not abstract analysis restricted to lawyers or theologians. Everyone sitting in shul is reading that and trying to figure it out as well. And welcome to debate about it, to ask questions, to argue about it, to make his or her case. There may be other religions that do this. I'm not familiar with them, but I think it's interesting. And when people say, what that's so creepy that the Jews are so disproportionately successful in modern life. I haven't written this essay yet because it's such a third rail, but I would just gently point out, it doesn't mean anyone is better than anyone, but for 2,000 years, we haven't been allowed to own land. We couldn't become farmers in most of Europe. And so we were stuck in the ghettos reading the Torah, basically, and arguing about it, and having this tradition of analysis, textual analysis. So bingo, you get late 21st century capitalism, a free pluralistic society like the United States. People who've sat around for 2,000 years analyzing texts are in a very good position because they already have those skills. Whereas people who, like my husband's lineage in Ireland, they were doing other really important things involving protecting their flocks or, hunting or, farming. Those are incredibly important. But textual analysis was not something that absolutely every single person was expected to do all day long, right? So, that's one, it's not magic. Anyone can do that. You can study the Torah all day long, whoever you are, right? And wherever you are, you can order a Torah. You can order the 5 books of Moses on Amazon, study, and teach your kids, as we're told in a famous prayer, you shall teach them diligently unto your children. We're not supposed to just study it and die. We're supposed to study it and teach our kids how to study it. Okay, Roscoe, I'm not gonna put your XXX comment in the on the screen, but Roscoe's speculation is that it's circumcision. I'll skip that. We'll have that argument off stage. All right. So Roscoe's been reading a lot. Maimonides was like, animal sacrifices are barbaric, y'all. And the Kabbalists say just reading about the sacrifices in the Torah is as if we're doing them. Well, that's really interesting. And the other thing I'll say is look at the ingenuity of a people who had to survive without animals, right? Like I said, we weren't allowed to own land. That means in many parts of Europe, we weren't allowed to do the things we had done in the Holy Land, which is be nomads, be shepherds and goat herds and cattle drivers. In Russia, my great-grandparents in Romania were not owning flocks. They were, by necessity, middlemen, right? Or, dealers in horses or poor people, right? But they were making what little money they could, buying and selling. My father remembers his grandfather making a living, taking old tires and cutting them up to make sandals out of them for peasants. They didn't have goats. They didn't have sheep. They didn't have property. Jews were constantly being pushed out of one country, having to flee to the neighboring country. So for 2,000 years, they were reading and arguing in study all day long. Women were the ones really making the money if they could, which is another interesting cultural heritage. But that's not magic. It's just an accident of history, but it's a practice open to anyone. I want to say that over and over. It's a practice open to anyone. And Roscoe's right. I don't know that passage, and if you can put a quote in the chat, Roscoe, that's fantastic. I don't know that Maimonides said animal sacrifices are barbaric. He probably did. He was a great sage, great rabbi, still read as like the major critic or analyzer of the Torah. And the Kabbalists, I didn't know that they're saying just reading about them is like we're doing them. That's really interesting. The mind is powerful. But both of these points of view give people with no land and no animals a way to still stay connected to God's directions, even though every year they're reading multiple chapters about how God is asking them to sacrifice. So obviously this caused distress and anxiety and unease among exiled Jews who were asking the rabbis, we're stuck in Vilna, in a tiny ghetto. We can barely go outside. How are we going to obey God's request that we sacrifice these beautiful, unblemished sheep or goats? And the rabbis very compassionately gave them answers that, made them feel better and also aligned with the spirit of what God was saying, even when the letter of it couldn't be executed because they weren't shepherds anymore. All right, you guys, it's almost Passover. We're going to talk about Passover a lot leading up to Passover. If you are observing Passover, I just learned this from my rabbi on Saturday, you got to start thinking about getting rid of the chametz which is the leavened bread. We actually made, Brian and I made leavened challah with almond flour. It turned out pretty yummy. Not very pretty, not attractive. It didn't really rise very much, but it tasted good, especially toasted. So everything leavened, the Cheerios, the bread, the yeast, right? The biscuits, you'd be surprised, donuts, cake, everything that has risen has to be cleared out. Orthodox families actually use a feather. I described this last year to make sure that every last bit of chametz is cleared out. Before there was packaging, I guess there were breadcrumbs left behind where people in the ghetto stored their bread. And there's actually a form you can fill out to sell your chametz to your local Chabad, or your maybe other synagogues are doing this, or donate them if they're unopened to a food bank, or leave them for homeless people, whatever you need to do to clear the leavened bread and cereal out of your home for Passover. And then, of course, we will be eating only unleavened bread, matzah, for 7 days, to remember that we were slaves in Egypt, and to remember that God brought us out of the land of Egypt, as it always says, with a mighty hand. But also that the matzah, as you recall, or if you weren't with us last spring when we talked about this, comes from the fact that the children of Israel were running away from the Egyptian army, and so they couldn't wait for their bread to rise. I have just baked challah, as I shared, and it took a good hour and a half, half an hour, punch it down, another hour, punch it down again, right? That's time. They didn't have the time. So they had to just spread the dough on, without yeast, on rocks in the sun and bake it in ovens very quickly over fire. And that's why matzah looks the way it does, flat. Matzah shmura made in Israel is kind of burned looking, the way it would have looked when people were running away from the Egyptian army and escaping slavery, heading toward freedom. It's a festival of freedom. So let's send prayers to the people of Iran, the citizens of Iran, as well as the citizens of all the countries around Iran that are being hit by missiles. May there be peace and justice and freedom in that region. You can't really have peace without freedom, in my view. It's not real peace without freedom. And as you see from these texts, we are born to be free, born free. Shall I burst into song now? I'm trying to do this every day, so I'll see you tomorrow at noon if possible. Thank you for joining me, and please, you guys, very exciting. As I think I mentioned, we're number 155 for Judaism today. We were number 88 yesterday on Apple's podcasts, which is incredible. And we're also being listened to all over the world, including really interesting African countries, Indonesia, Canada, sometimes Australia. So it takes resources to keep this going. It really, really does. You guys, I've got a team who I need to pay. So if you're getting anything valuable out of these readings, please go to Substack, go to Outspoken, subscribe as a paid subscriber. It's $7 a month. Or go over to Daily Clout and make a one-time donation. You can also subscribe at Daily Clout. But we do need resources to keep this going and to keep all the other wonderful stuff going that we do. Thank you for joining me. Bless you. And I will see you tomorrow. This time, I hope and trust. Bye-bye.